All right, all right. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Gabe Villamizar. I'm a global evangelist here at Lucidchart, and I'm really excited that you're able to join us today. I know people are trickling in. We had over 1,000 registrations for this webinar live stream, so we're excited to hear from Dave Crenshaw. I met Dave because we're both LinkedIn Learning authors. Dave, you have over 30 LinkedIn Learning courses, right?
Yeah, 31 today.
31.
One just came out. Yeah.
31 today. So, I only have a few, and I'm like, man, this guy's like really killing it in the space on remote work and productivity tips, time management, and on and on. So, Dave, you want to take just 1 or 2 minutes to tell people who you are, your background, and and who you are?
Yeah, so I'm an author, a speaker. I have 5 books around the topic of productivity and leadership. I am from Salt Lake City, Utah, pretty much in Gabe's backyard here. And my big claim to fame is that I was mentioned by Chuck Norris in the official Chuck Norris fact book. That is a true fact.
That's awesome, man. No, love it. And again, thank you again. Everybody's trickling in and joining us, whether you're watching live right now or on demand. Thank you again for joining us. And we want to, before we get started and dive into the content, we have super actionable content. Like I said earlier, this is 10 tips for avoiding remote work fatigue. I hope all of you are doing well, wherever you're joining us from, you're staying safe. A few things that I want to cover before we start is we want to make sure everybody engages throughout this whole 45 minutes. So please use the Q&A widget. And we're going to be answering some of the questions throughout the webinar. We're going to select 5 questions at the end of the webinar, and you're going to answer those live. So you get Dave to answer those questions for you. And feel free to also use the chat to interact with each other, participants. Make sure that if you are going to use the chat, to select from the drop-down little arrow, it says all panelists and attendees. I think by default, it just says just to all panelists only or other options. So make sure you select the all panelists and attendees option. And to start and to kick things off, if everybody that's joining us and watching right now live, if you don't mind answering in the chat, if you can tell us what, if anything, makes remote working difficult for you, right? Again, so if you can answer in the chat right now, what is that one thing that has been making working remote very difficult for you? So we're gonna see those answers dropping in the chat, and thanks again for interacting. So for me, if I can answer that question, has been like, man, having 3 kids under the age of 7 has been very difficult to focus and get things done. But I'm surviving, I'm thriving, and I've watched a few of your courses for the past month or so, Dave. So let's get started. Should we do this?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. We have a few slides. Again, 10 actionable tips on how to avoid remote work fatigue. Let's go ahead and get started here. Share screen, and you should be able to see that, and presentation mode. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and please don't forget to ask questions again in the Q&A widget or the chat. So tip number 1, Dave, avoid switch tasking. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So my first book is called The Myth of Multitasking. And one of the biggest obstacles to productivity is this concept. We get confused about whether or not we're being productive. And the reality is your brain cannot handle multiple active tasks at the same time. You have to switch back and forth. So when you're trying to do multiple tasks that require attention, so like you're watching this webinar and you're answering an email, you know who you are, you're doing it right now. When you do that, you're actually switching back and forth. And every time you switch, you pay a cost. So a lot of the tips that we're going to share during this is built around this concept of avoiding switch tasking. So let's do a little exercise first to understand why this is such a big deal. So the easiest way to do this, if I'm going to hold up my screen, I don't know, Gabe, if you want to put me up on the screen for just a second. Or
Yep.
So all you have to do is just grab a piece of paper and draw 3 lines across it like this. Doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't have to be perfect. So what you're going to end up with are 4 rows. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little exercise that illustrates why multitasking, or more accurately, switch tasking, costs us so much. So Gabe's sharing that screen back up on the top. What you're going to do is you're going to make it say on the first row, don't do this until I say go. This is a timed activity. Go ahead and go to that second slide, Gabe.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to make it look exactly like this. So the first row will say switch tasking is a thief. And the second row will have the numbers 1 through 21. Why 21? That's how many numbers there are, how many letters there are in the phrase switch tasking is a thief. So this isn't a think outside the box activity. You just make it look exactly like you see there. I'm going to time this myself. I'll call out the time every 5 seconds, and you just make a note of how long it took you to make your top 2 rows look exactly like this. Okay, you ready to do that? Gabe,
let's do this. Yep, let's do this.
Okay, so here we go. Get ready, get set, go. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Just make it look exactly like what you see on the screen. 15. 20. 25. 30. We'll go 5 more. And then 35. Okay, great. Now go ahead and, if you did this exercise, go ahead and type your number into the chat window. How many seconds did it take you to make it look exactly like this? So I see 15, 20, 37, 22. Okay, great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do this a second time. But this time, what you're going to do is we're going to simulate what happens when you switch tasks. You pay a cost associated with that. So let's go to the next slide, Gabe.
Okay.
What you're going to do is make it look like what you see on the screen. The same thing you did before. Switch tasking is a thief, 1 through 21. But for every letter that you write, you're going to write a number. So you'll write S, and then 1, and then W, and then 2, and then I, and then 3, and so on. Got it? So again, this is a timed activity, and type in your time when you're done. Okay? Get ready, get set, go. 5 seconds.
And this is intense. I don't think we've ever done an activity like this in a live stream webinar.
10
Love
seconds.
It.
15. 20. You got to make it look like the entire first 2 rows. So it's got to have both switch tasking as a thief and the numbers 1 through 21. We just crossed 20. 25. This is where most of you stopped last time. 30, 35. Remember, you got to have switch tasking as a thief and the numbers 1 through 21. 40, 45, 50. We'll go 10 more. 55. And 60. If you're not done now, just give up.
Okay.
Now, the one thing that we missed out on when you do it in a webinar like this is when I do this with a live audience, you hear lots of people laughing and groaning. And yeah, someone said, I give up. Because comedy is truth and pain. And you just experienced the first 3 costs of switch tasking. And these you experience every single day at work. So let's go to the next slide to show those 3 costs. The first and most clear one that you saw is time. The amount of time it takes to complete things increases. And whenever you try to jump from task to task, this is an unavoidable cost. Some people are going to pay a little less than others, but it's still there. Next is the quality of the work. Take a look at how it appeared the first time you did it, the first 2 rows versus the second time. Now, go ahead and raise your hand. How many of you, if you can click on that or just type me in the chat window, how many of you ended up on a number other than 21? Now, it's a lot of people. See, look at all the people saying
all
that.
The me's are Timothy,
exactly.
Scott, Jaikar, Kevin. Yeah, a lot of people.
Yeah. And this is a very simple task. It's a very mundane, everyday task. But the moment we introduce the switching into it, it becomes difficult. And that goes to the third one, which is stress. You start to feel that stress in your day when you're jumping from task to task. So as we go through the rest of the tips, keep in mind that what we're trying to do is reduce the number of switches that are taking place in your workday. If we can reduce the number of switches, you're going to get more time, you're going to improve the quality of your work, and you're going to reduce your stress levels.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, everybody, for this chat's on fire, man. But if you don't mind, again, I see a lot of these chats coming only to panelists. So make sure that before you type in the chat and push send, you select on the little drop-down arrow and select all panelists and attendees, so everybody can see each other's comments, unless you want only the panelists, us to just see your comments. All right, here we go. So awesome, Dave. So let's cruise on. Tip number 2, here we go.
All right, so the next one is to determine your start and finish lines. Part of the problem that we have with working from home, a lot of people think if you work from home, you're going to work less hours, right? Some bosses feel like they have to monitor people's time. That is the complete opposite of the truth. What most people do is they allow that line between personal and work to just blur, and that's not healthy. You're actually less productive overall when you do that, even though you might work more hours. So what we want to do is to create a clear starting line and a finish line, like you're in a race. So what's the time you're going to start work each day, and what is the time that you're going to finish? And you put that in the calendar. You make a commitment to it. And sometimes, like Gabe said, he's got 3 kids under the age of 7, right? I've got 3 kids myself. You have to have multiple start and finish lines in your day. How many you have or what time you choose isn't really what matters. The point is that you have it and you stick to it.
Awesome. Great tip number 2. Tip number 3.
Okay, so this relates to the finish line, having that schedule, planning your breaks and making them count. I have a book called The Power of Having Fun. And what I found was that when people take a break, on average about every 90 minutes or so, you improve your productivity. So it's especially in a situation like this where people are feeling more stress, they're feeling more confined. It's so important to have scheduled breaks in your day. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be 5 minutes, it could be 15 minutes. Just stop, watch a funny video.
So what should people do? What type of breaks? Is this something that they enjoy? Is this something new? Go for a walk, exercise, or does it matter?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is it surprisingly doesn't matter. There was a study that found that people doing something active, like going for a jog or a run, as compared to someone just sitting and playing video games, the result is actually the same. So the key is to choose something that you enjoy, you find meaningful. So for me, I'm a geek. So I like to play video games. That is my refreshing break that I take.
Okay, and then how long should these breaks be? 10 minutes, 30 minutes, and how often throughout the day? Like
within your day, no less than 5 minutes. I find 15 is about right. And what that does is it resets the clock and helps you be more productive afterward.
Awesome.
Someone put, I knit for 15 to 20 minutes. That's great.
Jenny Cormier, awesome. Good stuff here. All right, plan your breaks and make them count, people. Love it. Number 4.
All right, so create a plan for managing and minimizing distractions. You've got lots of different things that can distract you. I like thinking of it in terms of the 5 senses. So sight, what things are you seeing that might be distracting? Where your window is sitting? Are you seeing a TV close by? Sound, what are you hearing? I know one professional who he works from home and has been for a while, but he heard the sounds of his kids and it became distracting. So one thing that he did was he used the fan to create white noise for that.
I use that.
It works.
Yeah, I use that big time. The heater in the basement because it's a little bit chilly, but yeah.
Yeah. Sight, sound, smell, look for phantom smells, that sort of thing. Taste, meaning you have healthy snacks close at hand. I mean, if it's part of your break, that's fine to go up and get stuff. But if it interrupts the flow of work, you don't want to have to, get out of the way to do that. And then touch, meaning ergonomics, making sure that everything that you use is close at hand, making sure that your posture is set up properly, that your monitor is in a healthy place. All of these things can help reduce the distractions that you're experiencing while working from home.
So I took a lot of these tips that I read from you a month ago or so, and I hung up on, so I took over our guest bedroom in our basement and turned it into my, work at home office. And after I watched this tip from you, I cheated a little bit. I obviously read your content and watched it a month ago or so. I hung up, what's the easiest thing that I had? What's something that I had laying around to decorate the walls? Because they're just empty walls. It's the guest bedroom. There's not much. It's the last one that you think of decorating, at least in our family. So I put some maps. We have this world map, and we have a United States map. And then about the Starry Night, $5 poster on Amazon. Then I got the Scentsy warmer candle out to my right. And then I
Nice.
also make sure that it's very illuminated, the lighting. So I literally have 3 different types of lights in that room, and it has made a whole difference. Before, I dreaded going there. Right now, it's just like, okay, it's much better. It's not like I love coming to this room, but it's much pleasant for me to now go there. And I've gotten into habit the past 10 weeks or 8 weeks or however long we've been in full quarantine or working from home. And it's helped a lot tremendously.
Yeah. And you bring up a great point, Gabe, which is you don't have to do big things. Like right now, this is the ideal office, but this has taken me like 20 years to get to this place. And if I started in the beginning, it was a little tiny corner in a little tiny apartment with a beat up hand-me-down desk. Little improvements over time make a big difference. You don't have to break the bank. You don't have to do dramatic things to be productive at home.
Love it. Tip number 4. So a lot of you may be using Lucidchart, and whether you do or not, we're going to be sending all of you some of these cool templates in a post email webinar that we're going to send you, I think, later today or tomorrow. So here's an example of combining tips 2, 3, and 4 that Dave, you're talking about, and how you can utilize Lucidchart for this. So what you're looking at right now on screen is you can create a schedule with Dave's time management recommendations. As you can see here on the legend, we have starting and finish line, and put that in, carve some time throughout each day and visualize that, right? Make it a whole visual concept, a visual schedule, and then maybe print this or take a screenshot of this or have this visually in a place where you can see, okay, and this is going to be my break time. This is going to be my starting and finish line times. This is going to be my family oasis when I take breaks with my family. And that way you stay more committed, right, Dave? Or I mean,
Oh yeah, this is a beautiful tool for using that. I love how you're using Lucidchart for that. And what I would say is, set it up and try the experiment for 2 weeks. Give it a full 2 weeks,
2 weeks,
and then make adjustments after that, and just keep tweaking it every 2 weeks.
Love it. So we're going to be sending some of these templates in Lucidchart for everybody that registered. So you should be good to go. All right, moving on here. Tip number 5. Go ahead.
Yeah, invest in designing your space. And by the way, he's reminding, if you have questions, put those in the Q&A at the bottom.
Yep.
So we kind of talked about that. What I want to talk about, though, are the boundaries of your space. And it's, this is great, Gabe. I got a story just this morning that you'll love.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
A woman that I know, she's a successful professional. She talked about how her husband is sharing the same space with her. So he's working in the bedroom. She literally crawled on her hands and feet to go into the room to get her computer because he was on a Zoom conference.
Oh, wow.
And then she said, too, that because it's set up that way, her makeup is being held hostage.
Dang, dude. Okay, no makeup for her. Okay.
Yeah. So the point of this is, like you said, you find a spot and create it. Like in that situation, what I would advise is going on Amazon and get some of those little prop up, what are they, panels, right? Like you're behind, you're changing the old time changing my clothes behind the thing. Get something like that. Create the space. Put tape on the ground and say, this is where I'm going to work. When I step in it, I'm in work. When I step out, I'm out of work. That way we can start to create that separation between work and personal life that's so essential.
And let's say, so some of our viewers right now, let's say they don't have a room or a dedicated room or the space. Should they do that in their kitchen? Should they transform their room? How can they design? How do they, number one, choose which space should they design? And how would they go about that? Do you have a specific area in the house? If you have like a small, apartment, small apartment.
A corner is a great place to start. I don't care what corner it is, whether it's in the kitchen or your bedroom, but put it in the corner. That way you're removing visual distractions. I've even talked to people who, they're working in New York, and some of those apartments, I mean, they're like, how do I create a space? My bed is my workspace. So even if you're in a spot like that, create a psychological barrier. Don't lie down in bed and try to work. That's actually the worst possible place.
Really? What about your couch? Couch as well? Laying that?
Couch is a bad idea if you can avoid it. But if we have to do it, get a bed desk or get a couch desk and turn it so that you're sitting up in the bed and you're working from the side, so that you're physically and psychologically moving how you are to create that workspace. And when the desk is in front of you, it's work. And if you push the desk, they've got some nice roller desks on Amazon, places like that aren't that expensive, to create that physical space rather than sitting at the couch with the laptop in your lap.
Love it. Here, Berto Aguilar says, my couch is called the conference room. Libby says, my back is to the visual distractions behind me. Somebody said, keep knives out of reach. Deanna, I agree with you.
That's
We don't
good.
want anybody getting stabbed or poked.
Yeah.
Good comments, good chat, good interactions. Let's keep that going. So again, tip number 5, invest in designing your space. Love that. Okay, should we move on? Tip number 6?
Let's do it.
Bam.
Okay, so we've talked about physical boundaries. We've talked about schedule boundaries. Now let's talk about the people that you work with. And one of the biggest problems that people experience, and they've experienced this even in the traditional office space prior to us all working from home, but it's become a bigger issue at home, is there's no boundary or expectation as in terms of how we communicate with each other. For example, when you send an email to someone, what is the reasonable expected response time for that email? What if they send you something in instant messaging? What's the reasonable response time? When is the time to use instant messaging versus email versus a text message? We sometimes think that people just lack common sense, but there is no such thing as common sense.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the result of repeated experience. So, and I know you've got a great tool that you can use for Lucidchart. If you want to put that up, you want to have a discussion as a team to determine what are we going to use? What are the expectations? What are the right channels? So that when we send a message to someone, they know what we know about that response time.
No, yeah. So again, you can obviously transform and utilize Lucidchart as your visual, workboard or visual workspace, so you can communicate with your team, right? For example, this template that we're going to be sending again via email. Don't fret. I mean, how many of you are watching this want this template? Type me in the chat so we can kind of gauge some interest. In this type of template, you can all collaborate. Wow, me's are exploding. I love it.
Yeah.
And this type of template, which is visually appealing and very pretty, you can all collaborate at the same time with collaborated cursors and drop these sticky notes in the product. Type in real time, or you can create them separately at your own different times if you're in different parts of the world. And even better, you can this could be your living, breathing document where a new hire comes on board and joins a team. Then you share this document with them. For example, before this whole quarantine and remote work, our SVP of sales, Stan Cook, who might hate me for saying this, he had in his Slack notification, I don't do Slack. So when anybody in the company try to Slack him, you would automatically expect not to get a response from him right away or for whatever amount of time. Well, that obviously has changed now. And everybody in the company knew that if you want to get a hold of Dan Cook, email was the best way. For me, it's reverse, right? I hardly check my work email. I don't even keep up with my work email. Everybody makes fun of me because I have over 40,000 emails, unread emails in that email. I keep up with my Slack and I'm very organized with my Slack, and that's what works for me. But I've had to communicate that with my team, and having such a template can help you and your team be on the same page and on sync.
Yeah. If I were consulting a company, how I would use that template is I would create a section for each type of communication. Here's Slack, here's text, here's phone. And then we all have a conversation online using Lucidchart, dragging and dropping. When's the right time to use Slack? When's the right time to use text? So we all get on that same page and create a sort of common sense. Love
it. Okay, moving on here to the next one. Tip number 7, Dave, take it away.
Yeah, make the most of your meetings and use them to prevent switch tasking. When you have a meeting, we need to have a clear agenda in mind. It's amazing to me how many meetings I have seen crop up, especially in the current situation, that would not have happened before simply because we feel like we're not connected to each other. I think you want to create those situations for connection, but a lot of people are complaining that they're overburdened with the number of meetings. So when we have a meeting, let's have a clear agenda that's written down, that we all agree to that, and that when we're in that meeting, we are not having other things take place at that time. So typically, if we can be focused, the meetings can be shorter than we've been having them. You've heard the phrase, nature abhors a vacuum. Well, I find that the time abhors a vacuum. In other words, if you create a meeting that's going to last an hour, guess what? It's going to fill up that whole space. It'll take up the time, yeah. So let's create more condensed, more concise meetings with clear agendas.
Okay, here's another template. Thanks, Dave. I mean, that's great. Along the same lines of what you're talking about, here's another template that we're going to be sending you guys. of how visuals can help you get more out of your meetings. And again, whether this is a one-on-one meeting, whether it's a daily stand-up that you have with your team, whether it's your weekly team meetings or team meeting notes, so you can visualize, understand, communicate, and collaborate visually, and have, again, that source of truth, that living document where you can come back to and open as you have your one-on-one, as you have your team meetings, and everybody can visualize and see, okay, this is what we need to improve. This is the objective of the meeting. This is next steps. This is the follow-up sections. And here are the notes of everybody. For example, the one on the right, team meeting notes. If you want to give everybody a voice, because there's different types of individuals in the workforce, right? And if some people are introverts, extroverts, if you want to give everyone a voice, what if you create this team meeting notes and everybody can add their ideas and drop them in a Lucidchart document? So we love, using whatever tool you use. Obviously, we're all for that. But again, we're created based on Dave's tips, some of these templates to help you think, work, and collaborate visually. Okay, moving on here, tip number 8.
Yeah, invest in relationships at home and work. This goes back to the budgeting concept, and part of that budget needs to be for the relationships that you have. So while we want to not have excessive meetings, we do want to have time to connect with people personally. And sometimes all that is, a really good friend of mine and a fellow LinkedIn Learning instructor is Dean Carroll. He's got some great stuff on sales.
I got to check it out.
Okay. And he just sent me a message one day. It said, Dave, for no other reason, I just wanted to check and see how you were doing. Hope everything's going well. And just those little moments like that make a big difference. And at home, making sure that your schedule accommodates the people that you have. If you've got children at home, make sure that the budget includes time to pay attention to them.
Love it. Here's another example of how you can utilize Lucidchart. Again, we'll be sending you these via email. Here's a scavenger hunt activity that you can use with your team. And I personally, working from home, right, at Lucidchart, all of our 600 plus employees were obviously obedient, and they all start working from home. Our leadership cares about our health, and this really affected me. I was like, how am I going to build relationships really with my team? Because I'm a very social human being, I guess.
Really?
I guess so. And sometimes it was hard. I was like, why am I feeling this way? And I started FaceTiming my work friends out of the blue. So I'm like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing, Gabe? What are you calling me? I'm like, I just wanted, what's up, dude? How's your day going? And I needed that. And I realized that, that was really like investing in those relationships helped me lighten up my mood. It just made me feel better. And here's another example of how you can do that with your team, with your individual department, etc. All right. Man, the chat is on fire. Everybody's doing good. Virtual happy hour with the team. John, I like that idea. I love 2 truths and a lie, Whitney. I can't wait to get these templates. Eustacia, we got your back. We got you. Whitney, Pranana Gupta. Awesome. Let's keep cranking here. And I hope people are not switch tasking during this webinar, right? That wouldn't be a good idea. Going back to tip number 1. Okay, tip number 9.
Of all the things that you can do, there are only 1 or 2 things that are most valuable, and you want to focus your time on those. This is true even if you're not working from home, and so many people get sucked into doing low-value activities. I'm not saying that you don't need to do them sometimes. It's not a requirement of your job, but you want to budget time in your calendar. There's that word again, budget the time for most valuable work. So for example, my 2 most valuable activities are creating content and delivering content, just like I'm doing right now. And I want to make sure that at least 70 to 80% of my schedule is devoted just to those 2 most valuable activities. Take some time, figure out what your most valuable activities are, and budget more time. Most of the people here, 80% is too high, but maybe you can push it up to 40 or 50%.
And how do you find out what's the most valuable work? Is that something you ask your manager? Is that something you can come up with yourself, test trial and error?
So I've got a whole process on that in my LinkedIn Learning course. I've got a course called Time Management Fundamentals, but basically boiling it down is you list everything that you do, the categories of work, and you ask yourself, how much would it cost me to pay someone else to do this for me? I'm not saying you have to hire someone else, but that creates sort of an objective way to value everything that you do. And my guess is you're going to find that you're doing a lot of minimum wage type work or work that's worth, $10, $15 an hour. And when you're doing your best stuff, it's worth many more dollars per hour. And that's the kind of stuff that's hard to replace. Therefore, that's what makes you hard to replace.
Love it. So again, a lot of Dave's content is on LinkedIn Learning. So if you go to LinkedIn Learning and search for Dave Crenshaw, you're going to find all his 31 courses, not 30, but 31. I got that right this time. And obviously his books on Amazon, if you search for him
you
on
can go
Amazon.
to davecrenshaw.com/learn. And that's a quick link that'll take you right to all those courses.
Great. So focus on your most valuable work. How are we doing on time? We're almost up. So we're doing good on time. Awesome. Thank you. I know you usually spend a lot of time on this, all this.
This is fun.
So thank you for expediting
fire.
and going rapid fire this whole thing. And thanks for adjusting here. So last tip before we jump into Q&A, because we want people to get back to work and put these tips into action. Tip number 10.
All right. So the best testimonial that I ever received and cannot use, and I'll tell you why in a moment, was from the wife of a business owner that I worked with. And he was multitasking on people constantly. He had 5 daughters. He would not just do it at work, but he'd also do it at home. And when I helped him reduce the switch tasking, it made a huge difference. And one time I was out at dinner with him and his wife and a few other people. And as we were leaving, his wife took me by the hand and with tears in her eyes said, "I don't know what you did to my husband, but thank you." And the reason why she said that is because there's a fourth cost. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so we said in the beginning, switch tasking increases the amount of time it takes to complete things. It decreases the quality of work. It increases your stress, but it also damages relationships. If you multitask on a human being, I don't care how efficient you think you're being, you're communicating to them that they are unimportant, that they're less important than whatever it is you're doing. So we have to make it a priority whenever we're talking to any human being, any person, at work, at home, a customer on the phone. We don't do anything other than give them our full attention. And when we do that, that becomes a powerful differentiator in a world that's addicted to the myth of multitasking.
This is really powerful. I think I have a hard time with this concept. One thing that really has worked for me, if you don't mind me sharing, Dave, as soon as I get home, I put my phone in airplane mode and it goes in a drawer that's right by the garage door.
That's great.
And that stays there till like 9 or 10 p.m. So that way I'm truly devoting my attention. Now it's really tempting, right? To look in that drawer to catch up on a million things that I have to do. We can always find an excuse. I mean, all these things were like smartphone was designed to get you to come back and spend a lot of time in there. So that has worked magic for me. Not only just putting my phone in the drawer because I kept buzzing and vibrating, and then psychologically I could just hear that, and then that took my mind off the task that I was doing. I had to put it in airplane mode to really, make it work.
That's beautiful that you can do that. I think a lot of people listening to it would say that is an extreme jump for them. So what I would suggest is start small. Maybe rather than maybe pick just a 30-minute window in your day or an hour window in your day. But at the very least, turn it off at least 1 hour before bedtime. You got to do that. Okay. Otherwise, you're creating horrible sleep hygiene, which will spill into your inability to sleep, which is going to spill into your productivity the next day. And it's just going to create a horrible cycle. So find that spot, even if it's just saying at dinner, we don't touch our phones, we put them away. That's what my family does. We hide them all away at dinner time.
Okay, great. I mean, people are loving these tips. This is good stuff, Dave. All right. So here's a recap of all the 10 tips that we just discussed. Feel free to share in the chat which one is your favorite. So select 1, 2, or a few that you want to work on. As what I recommend. Obviously, work on all of them, but we really hope.
Let's pick one. That's my suggestion.
Pick one. Is that
pick one.
Okay.
Focus on that one.
So choose
what's the one?
Let's say out of these top 10, which one's the one you're going to work on this week, this month, or starting today?
Yeah.
And feel free to chat it or write it down so you can make it happen. And let's jump into Q&A. We're doing good on time. Awesome, Dave. Okay, let's jump into Q&A. Again, here's Dave Crenshaw's .com/home.
That'll take you to the working from home course on LinkedIn Learning that is completely free right now. LinkedIn Learning's made available for free. No sign up, no trial, no anything. You just go to that link, start taking the course.
And you're obviously on LinkedIn and Twitter. So let me go ahead and stop sharing here, and then let's jump into some of the Q&A that my team has moderated. And we have, let me make sure I got this. Okay, so question number one, you ready, Dave?
I am ready.
Okay, again, thank you again for joining us and asking these questions. We select 5. So number one, what can you do when the break time becomes the distraction, and how do you get over the guilt when you get distracted?
Okay, well, first of all, I wouldn't say guilt is anything healthy when it comes to distraction. Our goal is not to be perfect, but to improve. And so the first thing that I would do is look at how many times you're getting distracted, or maybe you just measure, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how distracted am I in my typical day? So if you're 10 being great, you're not distracted, 1 being the worst. So maybe you're at a 2 today. Maybe you're getting distracted all the time. Let's see if we can raise it up to a 3. Let's make progress. So let's replace guilt with making progress. And then when does the break become a distraction? Again, I would use the timer on that the same way that I use the schedule with work. So set a timer for 15 minutes and say, for this 15 minutes, I'm going to do whatever I want that's reasonably healthy, and I'm just going to do that. And when it goes off, I'm going to set it aside and then go back to work. The schedule is the biggest source of trouble when it comes to working from home, that we do not have a schedule, therefore we allow anything to occur.
So the schedule is key. Okay, that's awesome. Man,
yeah,
I need to work
it's
on my
simple.
schedule then.
It's so simple, yet I'm surprised at how little we use that schedule, how little we use timers to help us out with things like that.
Great. Thanks, Dave. So number 2 here, what do you do with Slack? By the way, a lot of you asked, what is Slack in the chat? Slack is just a messaging platform for work or personal. So it's like a messaging platform. Yeah. So the question is, what do you do with Slack in terms of boundaries? Notifications come up all the time. It's interrupting my work, but sometimes it can be urgent.
Well, okay. And I want to step back for just a second from the concept of Slack itself.
Okay.
And I'll explain what I mean. Sometimes people ask me, Dave, what's the best app I should use? What's the best tool I should use to be productive? And there's only one that I recommend, and that's Lucidchart. But everything else, what I say is, it's not the tool that matters, it's the principle that you're living. And so let's go back to the principle that I taught earlier. The principle is we need to get on the same page with how we communicate. Slack is just one method of communication. It's just a place where people can go to talk about a project that we're working on. So the question is, what are the boundaries? Every channel has to have a boundary. So we have that conversation, we can use Lucidchart to have that conversation, and we create those boundaries. So if Slack is an emergency channel, and personally I wouldn't recommend it that way, then we accept that we're going to be interrupted. Personally, I prefer something like a text message as an emergency channel. That's I'm old school. I like the old Batman TV show, right? He had the bat phone, and when the commissioner called the red phone, he picked it up no matter what was going on, and he did something about it. So as a group, you determine what the one bat phone is, and then everything else has there's the word again, schedule. When you're going to check it. How many times a day am I going to check email? How many times a day am I going to check Slack? What's the appropriate time to return phone calls? These are boundaries that you can all create. It just takes a little bit of time to create them.
Awesome. So great answer here. Do we have time for 3 more, Dave?
I think we'll fit it in. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Man, people are sticking around. There's still like a lot of people in this webinar. So for the team meeting notes, do you recommend having people add their notes during the meeting, before or after, especially if you want to prevent switch tasking?
If we want to prevent switch tasking, I think before and after. But honestly, what I would do is I would say, let's have a time designated when it's going to happen. So let's focus on the conversation. Now let's pause and give everybody 3 minutes to post their notes. So, and as a teacher, there's a concept that I've learned that means you have one talk, all talk, and no talk. And that means that one talk is when we're all listening to one person speak, like we're doing right now. No talk means we're all sitting, we're all taking notes. And then all talk is we're all jumping in and brainstorming together. I think Lucidchart helps you manage that. And a meeting, you just want to have we have clearly that we're moving from each phase of talking as we're going through. There's an appropriate time and there's an inappropriate time.
Great. Number four, what if your job, let's say you're an admin or executive admin assistant, requires you to switch tasks? What happens then?
Great question. And the answer is you have to build more buffer in your day. There are some positions, there are some industries where switching is inevitable. I mean, like at the most extreme end of the spectrum, let's say a 911 operator. These are people I've actually consulted and talked with.
Oh, wow.
Their job is to be interrupted. Therefore, we have to accept that that is going to occur, and we have to accept that those costs are going to get paid: time, stress, quality, right? That's their job, to pay switching cost. If you're an assistant, you're going to have to pay some switching costs. So what that means is, let's build 40% of buffer into your day, 50% of buffer where you're not allowing yourself to schedule anything. Where you're going to get frustrated, where you're going to get in trouble, is if you overscheduled your day and then those switches occur. Now, the beautiful thing is, if you build enough buffer in your day, when those interruptions don't happen, it's like bonus time, man. You got like all this extra time that you can redevote to something else. So build buffer time and accept that some positions are going to have to pay switching cost.
Buffer time, I love it. And last question here: how do you find time to invest in yourself, personal development, while working from home? So how do you make that time, or find the time to develop yourself?
You carve it out in advance. You make it a priority. Now, when I talk about scheduling something in your calendar, a lot of people think in terms of a 2-week horizon. Can I do it in the next 2 weeks? And you look at it and you go, I have too much to do. I'll never be able to devote time to myself, right? Instead, think of a 2-month horizon. So if you're not able to do it now, look as far into the future as you need to look and say, when can I create a recurring appointment for myself every Friday at noon, or whatever time is appropriate for you? And then you create that recommended, that you create that recurring appointment in your schedule, and then you stick to that schedule.
This is a good tip here. Yeah, I was on mute. So we just launched a little quick poll before people start dropping. Would you recommend this webinar to a friend? Give us your honest answer here. It's going to be open for a few more seconds. So if you don't mind, answering, because we want to do more of these. We want to, obviously, people have loved, I think it's a no-brainer at this point. People have loved having you, Dave. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's been fun. It's great.
People have, consumed your content here, and I know they're going to want to learn more from you. So I hope you really, truly, that whether you're watching live right now or on demand, you consume more of Dave's content. It has helped me transition the whole, being physically at an office to work from home. And to the point where I was going crazy, to the point that I'm like, I think I got this. I think I can do this. And I have still a lot of other room for improvement. Dave, any last words?
I'll just come back to that principle of focusing on people. I'll share a really quick story, if it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, do it.
I was watching the Super Bowl once with my son, or with my family. We had friends over, we had guests. And my son held up a book while I'm watching the game, and he goes, "Daddy, read story," in the middle of the game, right?
Okay.
What do you do in that situation? Do I multitask on him? Do I, tell him to go away? But what I decided to do was to focus on him and read him the dang story. And it took 3 minutes. And at the end of it, he said, "Thank you, Daddy," and went off and went to play. And we all have moments like this where we have a choice. Are we going to focus on a person, or are we going to try and switch tasks on them? And the message I just want you to take away with is, people are worth your full attention. Give them that, and it will communicate to them the opposite of what happens when we switch tasks. We'll communicate to them that they are important.
Awesome. We'll leave it at that. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Dave. And everybody, have a good rest of your week. Have fun, guys. Take care.